I mean, the first thing I want to say really is many congratulations to Jasmine and the other European contributors to this. It's a thoroughgoing piece of work. I know a lot of work's been done in the UK by the UK Aid Network on it, Gideon and colleagues, and it's a high-quality tool for monitoring performance and for Paris Declaration targets, achievements, and so on. I think that we're now building up layers of it after several years is also very helpful in looking at trends and trying to really get underneath some of the rhetoric. It's very interesting, as Jasmine was saying, the rhetoric around that came out of the GERC the day before yesterday about an all-Europe approach, about commitments for member states to work towards targets by 2010. Well, to work towards having timetables in place by the end of 2010 is a renewed commitment. Well, they're actually supposed to achieve targets that they're way off track to achieve by 2010, not just develop timetables for that. And I think that there's a lot that came out of the meeting the day before yesterday that is cause for concern, and as Jasmine rather diplomatically puts it, which we will be watching very closely. The record of being 40 billion wide of commitments that ought to have already been made and delivered on, failed promises basically, is not a good one. And one may have a sense that obfuscation by spreading the load and loosening up the attribution of individual member states' targets is an approach that might make it easier to explain away and to make it more difficult to discover the actual trends. But I've no doubt that AidWatch will continue to do so in years going forward. The report highlights the fact that obviously that we're in the midst of a financial crisis, which is also a crisis for the poor. In which 200 to 400,000 infant deaths are likely to be attributable to that crisis during 2009 alone, and 2.8 million might be expected if the financial crisis and the recession continues through for years to come. There will be an additional number of deaths before 2015. This is serious business, therefore, and the reason that this is relevant is because of the collapse of all the other sources of potential development financing of one kind or another, foreign direct investment being one, obviously, and the remittances that have collapsed and the reduction in private financial flows. It all means that aid actually, and the significance of it in the fight against poverty and supporting poor people and poor states, is all the more significant, actually, precisely because the other buttressing and very important components of development are falling away and are likely to have fallen away for the next few years. So the fact of the Italian government, the Irish government decisions to actually start reducing their aid budgets is nothing short of shameful, although my notes say discouraging. But I mean, I'm afraid that I think it's shameful. And by contrast, it has to be said, the commitment to quantity by the British government, as evidenced in the budget, is one which deserves congratulation. But precisely because of the importance that aid in itself is going to have in the context of the recession, as I've said. So, UK aid effectiveness. There's a strong need for better quality, and quantity issues may be perceived as being less of an issue in the British record. But quality across Europe is an issue, and to some extent still the British record, I think, needs some attention, although progress is fair. The fact that, for instance, 80% of Italian aid actually is still tied aid, the fact that many countries continue to lack adequate transparency, and there is something that can be said, and that I'll say in a moment, about UK transparency. Although there's a contribution towards encouraging it, there is also more that could be done for our own transparency. And that so much comes with economic policy conditions, as Jasmine has said, means that we're still very far from really meeting the aid effectiveness aspirations and targets as embodied by Paris Declaration and as reinforced by the by the Accra Agenda for Action. Perhaps, well, not perhaps. I mean, we must give credit to this issue of the UK leading by example. It's a very strong example. The UK has, on quality, as I've said, made a very clear statement. On quantity, has made a very clear statement in the budgetary figures, and on quality has also made a very clear statement at the Accra High-Level Forum, launching the International Aid Transparency Initiative, which is a real contribution to the quality debate and challenges. However, it's also the case that improving predictability, for instance, is an area in which the UK still has a way to go. 40%, I think, of the aid in the Paris survey, 40% of the aid of the UK was not delivered in the year in which it was promised to be. That's a very significant figure, and obviously one which needs attention if one wants to be able to hold one's head up and lead by example on predictability. If one wants to be able to hold one's head up and lead by example on economic policy conditionality, then there is still work to do on the UK approach to the World Bank and the IMF with regard to the leverage that the UK has. Admittedly, it doesn't have a monopoly on leverage on the World Bank and the IMF, far from it. But it has very considerable leverage, and there is not enough evidence that that leverage is being used to effect real change in the conditionalities exercised by the IFIs. So there could be more to be done there. Also, I think in promoting transparency, and the International Aid Transparency Initiative is a good example of it. Good work has been done, and yet making conditions public of British aid and making the DFID website a place where there is publicly available information accessible about the aid programme, and indeed the Accra commitments on forward spending plans. There are still areas of progress. So much good work has been done, and I'm honest when I say that I think congratulations are due, and this isn't just because Diffid's sitting next to me. But, I think it's fair to say that in many ways the British government is regarded by others. I mean, some of them may have an appalling record themselves as aid donors, but the British government is regarded as being exemplary in some ways in its aid programme. But there is, it's very clear that there are still further ground to travel. I think for the moment I'll leave it at that, Alison, and bring in some other points later on.